You've probably seen a good amount of videos from other content creators who got early access to Burnice over the last few days. I'm not a part of this creator beta server, but I have watched a good amount of content that's been put out about her, and I've also been trying out some teams with the trial Burnice that's available in the investigation training course, so I wanted to take some time to talk about Burnice today. I'll link every early access video that I watched in the description so you can see what might have influenced the opinions that I have. A lot of people have put out some great content, so definitely give that a watch if you haven't already. Before we start here, I want to make 3 things very clear. 1. I don't have early access to Burnice, and I've only tested the trial versions of Burnice that are publicly available. Unfortunately, these trial stages are a poor indicator of Burnice's actual performance. The buffs that these stages give are a little ridiculous, and I'll expand on that a bit more when it's relevant later. 2, as the title and thumbnail for this video show, the teams that I've tested are all Piper teams. This video is going to be just as much of a Piper video as it is a Burnice video. 3, my opinions are based on feels crafting. I'm not a theory crafter, I haven't done any calculations or looked deeper into numbers at all. These are just my thoughts based on my experience trying her and some practical testing that I've done. Please reference some of the early access videos that I have linked in the description for more concrete testing and results. With all of that out of the way, let's get started! Yo, I'm Swift, and today we're going to be taking a look at Burnice. This video is going to be split up into a few sections. We'll start with a very brief overview of Burnice's kit. Next, I'll show the best clears that I had with 2 teams, a Burnice Lucy and Piper team, and a Burnice Caesar and Piper team. And I'll discuss my thoughts on both of these teams and Burnice's value in Piper teams. And lastly, I'll cover 3 concerns and things that I think you should be considering about her. The first 2 concerns are things that have been touched on by a lot of people, but the third is something that I haven't really been seeing anyone talk about. All of these sections are timestamped in the description, so feel free to skip around. Let's start off with Burnice's kit. This won't be an in-depth breakdown of her kit, just enough information so that we're all on the same page. If you do want a full guide and kit breakdown, check out some of the early access videos that I linked in the description, or let me know in the comments too, and that's something that I could work on after her release. Burnice is our first Fire Anomaly character, and also the first Anomaly character that has a presence off-field. Burnice's kit revolves around her heat gauge. This gauge has a total of 100 points, and you receive 1.4 points for every 1 point of energy that you use. After gaining 50 points of heat, Burnice enters the nitro fuel cocktail state, and she won't leave this state until you fully expend your heat gauge. Burnice enters combat with a full heat gauge, so as long as you never let your heat fully run out, she'll always be in this state. While in the nitro fuel cocktail state, when Burnice hits enemies with her EX special, her chain attack, her ultimate, or her hold basic attack, which costs 20 heat to use, she applies the scorched state to enemies that she hits. This scorched state can be seen by this marking here, and the state does not have a duration, so once you mark an enemy, they'll remain scorched until Burnice leaves the nitro fuel cocktail state. When any teammates other than Burnice hit scorched enemies, Burnice will trigger afterburn damage from off-field, and this also builds Fire Anomaly. This afterburn damage can trigger at most once every 1.5 seconds. This damage also gets a buff based on Burnice's Anomaly proficiency, getting 1% damage bonus for every 10 Anomaly proficiency, capping out at 30% when having 300 Anomaly proficiency. Afterburn damage is considered assist damage, so it also works with the Chaos Jazz Drive Disc set, which was introduced in this patch. Burnice's EX special has 2 versions. There's the Intense Heat Stirring method and Double Shot, which I'll refer to as EX1 and EX2 respectively. For both versions, you can hold her EX special to increase its duration. Burnice's EX1 allows her to spew flames at an enemy with 1 flamethrower. While doing this, you have the ability to move in a direction to dodge and then continue the skill afterwards. You can activate Burnice's EX2 in a few ways, with the easiest way being to use your EX special again while doing your EX1. In her EX2, Burnice uses both of her flamethrowers, and this increases the damage that the skill does, and the rate of Anomaly buildup at the cost of using more energy. Her EX2 also gets rid of the ability to dodge while moving, like she can do during her EX1. You can also shortcut directly to her EX2 by using EX special after her hold basic attack, her defensive assist, or her chain attack. Shortcutting her EX2 in any of these ways also reduces the minimum required energy to use her EX special, which can be particularly nice if you're low on energy. Burnice's ultimate has her jump up into the air and rain flames down on enemies from above. Her ult has a very respectable damage multiplier and also has a decent amount of Anomaly application. Once she's in the air, she also gives you the option to quick assist to your next character, and she'll continue shooting her flames after doing so. This is something you'll probably always want to do, since it also makes her ult last for an additional second, and it'll let you switch back to your main on-field anomaly applier while it continues to go on. One other great thing about Burnice's off-field presence is that she's currently the only character in the game that can actually trigger an attribute anomaly from off the field. While some other characters can build anomaly from off-field, or swap during certain animations to build anomaly while switching to other characters, no character in the game can trigger an anomaly unless they are the current active character. Burnice is able to bypass this rule either through her afterburn damage or from her ultimate's damage after you've done your quick assists. Burnice's additional ability increases her fire anomaly buildup of her EX specials, her hold basic attack, or her afterburn damage by 65%. She also extends the duration of burn by 3 seconds. Her additional ability is triggered by being in a team with another Anomaly character or any member of the Sons of Caledon faction. Because of her focus on off-field damage and Anomaly application, her strongest teams will likely see her being paired with another Anomaly character who can take up the majority of the field time. Now, let's get into the team comparisons and team comp discussions. As I mentioned earlier, these tests were done on the Disorder Combat Course 4, and this course has some additional effects that heavily impact certain mechanics. First off, there's a Daze debuff that reduces Daze application by 25%, so this makes you stun slower. In particular, this is impactful for teams that use Caesar. One of the big things that Caesar provides to a team, especially ones that don't use a stun character, is her high Daze application, so this does hurt her performance. The other stage modifiers, however, are all beneficial and in a pretty huge way. There's a 50% anomaly buildup increase when you have 2 Sons of Caledon members, which is big for anomaly-focused teams and makes them apply anomalies faster. Additionally, disorder damage is increased by 100%, which makes these damage numbers substantially higher than what you would normally expect. And triggering disorder also provides some additional effects. The HP gain doesn't matter, and I limited myself to only using 1 ult per fight to counteract the decibel gain, but the energy gain is extremely impactful for characters that want to use their EX specials often, in particular characters like Burnice and Piper. To start off, let's take a look at the current Anomaly team that I've been playing and what I feel is the current best Piper team, a Piper, Caesar, and Lucy team. This will act as a control team that we can compare against and will help to contextualize the other clear times that we're going to see. For each of these teams, I'll show the best clear time that I managed to start off, and then I'll have some other footage from other attempts while I talk more about those teams afterwards. As a reminder, I wouldn't put too much stock into these clear times because this content as a whole doesn't matter, and the stage buffs really do skew these teams' performances by quite a bit, but hopefully with these gameplay showcases you can at the very least get some gameplay ideas of how these teams function. I won't spend too much time talking about this team since it doesn't use Burnice. The fastest time that I managed with this team was a 45-second clear, and I was able to consistently clear within the low 50s. This team doesn't get to benefit much from the disorder-focused stage bonuses since it only really triggers disorder once by removing the shock that the Rampant Brute applies to itself. So keep that in mind as we look at the Burnice team. When it comes to build changes for the Burnice teams, I ended up changing my Lucy build to be more anomaly focused. This involved changing her to a 2-piece Freedom Blue set in place of the 2-piece Woodpecker Electro that she had equipped before. So I changed her slot 4 to an anomaly proficiency piece and her slot 5 to a fire damage bonus piece. I'll discuss the reasoning for this more a bit later. And as a way of nerfing our Piper in order to help compensate for the abnormal increase in performance that we're expecting to see from the Burnice teams, I swapped my Piper's Anomaly Mastery slot 6 to an unleveled HP percent slot 6 while using her in the Burnice teams. The goal of this was to slow down Piper's anomaly application to give a better idea of how her build-up rate would look without the 50% buff that we're getting from the stage, and although this doesn't line up completely, it does get her closer in line to what you would normally expect. Unfortunately, there isn't too much we can do about the buff disorder damage or the extra energy that it gives though. For the two Burnice teams that I did try, I'm going to show their clears back to back first, and then I'll discuss my thoughts on both of these team comps afterwards. First off, we have the premium team of Burnice, Caesar, and Piper. Now let's take a look at a lower investment team of Burnice, Lucy, and Piper. Surprisingly, the Lucy team ended up having a faster clear time than the Caesar team on this stage, with the Caesar team clearing in 38 seconds compared to the Lucy team clearing in 33. I was also able to consistently clear with the Lucy team in 36 to 38 seconds, making my average clears with that team on par with the best times that I could get on the Caesar team. Again, these clear times don't really mean much, and there could be a lot of factors that could sway this, such as my Lucy build being better than my Caesar build, although their builds have the lowest impact in these Piper and Burnice teams, or just better play on the Lucy side. Also, I think Caesar isn't particularly great in this type of content either, but before we get more into that Caesar versus Lucy stuff, let's just talk about Burnice and how she works with Piper. The big thing that Disorder teams have been lacking at this point in the game is the ability to build and trigger anomalies from off-field. Current Disorder teams require you to swap between multiple Anomaly characters, which can be a bit of a pain since every Anomaly character to this point wants a decent amount of field time to do their Anomaly application. Burnice helps to address this issue by allowing you to play one Anomaly character on-field and still build a different Anomaly at the same time from off-field. When paired with Piper, you're able to have Piper take the majority of the field time with her spins, but you're also able to get Burnice's off-field Anomaly application from her afterburn damage. In these showcases, I found it to be most worthwhile to alternate between Assault and Burn triggers as often as possible, in order to trigger as many Disorders as possible. This playstyle might have been skewed due to the extra Disorder damage from the stage buffs, and also the extra energy that allowed for both Piper and Burnice to use their EX specials more frequently than normal, so that's something to keep in mind while looking at this. In normal gameplay, I think that triggering 2 assaults for every burn and a half would probably be more comfortable and realistic. I also found it worthwhile to completely skip setting up Burnice's Scorched State on enemies in some situations. In the first wave, the smaller enemies die so quickly to Piper's damage that it's not worth the field time and heat loss from Burnice, and then you can just set up your Burnice stuff afterwards. I think that this will most likely be the case in Shiyu defense, where later floors normally start with a wave of trash mobs that Piper could just clear on her own pretty quickly. Since the bulk of Piper's Anomaly application comes from her EX special, there are times in longer fights where she can end up running low on energy, and her performance during these moments does suffer. I think having Burnice as a teammate who can swap in to take field time during these moments and build a large amount of Fire Anomaly using her EX2 felt really nice. You do want Piper to end up taking more field time in these teams, but I really enjoyed having that quick swap style of alternating back and forth between Piper and Burnice EX specials. As a whole, I think Burnice is one of the best partners, or just the outright best, that you could ask for in a Piper team. From what I could tell, being able to trigger large disorders so frequently ends up making the damage output of Piper teams quite a bit higher. At the very least, it allows you to front-load a good amount of damage through disorders early on in fights when Burnice and Piper have ample energy, but that performance might fall off a bit in longer content. I've had a lot of fun playing Piper, Caesar, Lucy since Caesar's release, but honestly speaking, I think playing a team with Burnice in it felt better, if not just for its damage, then at the very least it provided a smoother play experience. So if I could only pick one from Burnice and Caesar for Piper's team specifically, I think I would personally lean towards Burnice. Difficulty-wise, ZZZ hasn't been balanced around needing high-end teams in order to clear content, so this more fun playstyle, in my opinion, holds a lot of value, even if it doesn't end up being a strict upgrade like I think it would be damage-wise. Again, I could have an overinflated opinion on this due to the trial stages, so I'll definitely update my thoughts on these after Burnice's release. Now we can talk about Lucy and Caesar, and I guess I might have the hot take of preferring Lucy over Caesar in these teams, so I'm going to spend more time talking about Lucy. I prefer Lucy for a few reasons. One is that I'm extremely biased and I like Lucy more as a character. Another is that her M6 works extremely well in this team. Both Piper and Burnice's EX specials are able to trigger Lucy's M6 multiple times, which allows Lucy to add a nice amount of additional damage, and it also makes managing her cheer on buff extremely easy. Since Lucy is a fire character, she's also able to help contribute to fire anomaly buildup through her EX special and her M6, which I found more impactful than Caesar's physical application since Piper already applies so much physical anomaly on her own. This is also the reason that I switched her over to a more anomaly-focused build, since she will share a noticeable portion of that fire anomaly buildup. This change didn't make a huge difference, but I did end up lowering my best clear time by 2 seconds shortly after doing so. Again, this might just not be correlated, I might have just gotten lucky or played better. Lucy's cheer on buff and her buff from Kaboom the Cannon affect the full team as well, instead of only the on-field character, which helps with Burnice's off-field damage as well. Another thing that makes this team extremely comfortable is the flexibility of its ultimates. If you've seen some of my other Piper gameplay showcases, you'll notice that I tend to use Lucy's ultimate instead of Piper's the majority of the time. One reason for this is that Lucy's ult gives the next character that you swap into 20 energy, which can be nice for funneling energy to Piper, but the other reason that I choose to do this is that it allows Lucy to apply damage from off-field, while I can immediately swap back into Piper in order to start spinning again. Burnice's ultimate takes this aspect to another level, since it does more damage from off-field, lasts for longer so enemies are interrupted for longer, and it builds fire anomaly as well at a really great rate. This does come at the cost of not giving Piper energy, but that really isn't an issue most of the time, and if you do need that extra energy for Piper instead, running Lucy in this team still gives you that option to fall back on. Now let's talk about Caesar a bit more. Caesar does have some great upsides with the comfort that her shield provides and her high daze application, and these aspects should stand out more in endgame content. In this stage, I would end up killing before stunning the enemies, or just at the start of stun more often than not. But in content that lasts longer, or against enemies that particularly suffer from being stunned, Caesar's value should go up by quite a bit. While I've gotten used to playing Anomaly teams now without a stun character, Caesar makes getting to the stun window substantially quicker with her ability to quickly swap in for a defensive assist, and her EX2, which both apply a large amount of daze. Caesar also sees some big value in more aggressive content, where her shield would provide an extra level of comfort. Her resistance to interruption might not be the biggest thing in a Burnice and Piper team, since they both already provide their own anti-interruption and damage reductions once they get their EX special started, but the defensive utility that Caesar provides can still be nice, especially if you have difficulty dodging. One negative on Caesar's end, though, is that her flat attack buff that her shield provides only applies to the on-field character. Burnice can benefit from this buff while doing her EX special on-field, but her afterburn damage doesn't get to see this buff at all. However, Caesar's other offensive benefit, her damage bonus debuff that gets applied to enemies, does benefit all of Burnice's damage when it's up. And when Burnice isn't getting to benefit from Caesar's shield, Piper is, and the extra attack helps her assault damage by quite a bit. And on the topic of Piper, Caesar can also use the 4-piece Freedom Blues Drive Disc set to reduce enemy resistance to physical anomaly buildup when hitting with her EX special, and this is something that can help Piper stack on her assaults even faster. If you don't want to go that route though, then Caesar providing damage bonus from the Protopunk set also helps both Burnice and Piper's damage. I did have a lot of positive things to say about Lucy, but none of this is meant to push that Lucy is a better option than Caesar, just to highlight that she's an extremely solid and viable option in these teams. If you didn't pull for Caesar, or if you have a better use for her on your other team, then Lucy's a great choice. I've been running an Ellen team on my second side, and using Caesar there over Anby seems like a much bigger improvement for that team than it would be to run her over Lucy in a team with Piper and Burnice. However, as an A-rank character, Lucy sees huge benefits from her Mindscapes, in particular her M2 and her M6, and from having her signature W engine Kaboom the Cannon, which makes her buffs much more substantial. Without Lucy's signature or her Mindscapes, Caesar should end up outperforming her by a wider margin. Lucy is a rate up on Burnice's banner though, so there's a good chance you'll end up seeing her during your Burnice pulls. As a whole, both the Burnice Caesar Piper and the Burnice Lucy Piper teams felt very nice to play, but again this does come with some caveats. Again, the stage buff giving energy from Disorder can make a huge difference in these teams where both Burnice and Piper want to EX special as much as possible. Since these teams can trigger Disorder so often, you end up getting a very unrealistic amount of energy on this stage, and those Disorder numbers are also just higher than what you would actually expect to see from them because of the damage boost that they're getting as well. Even without these buffs though, I think that these teams should perform extremely well during normal gameplay. With all of those team thoughts out of the way, I wanted to cover some concerns I personally had about Burnice. I won't spend too much time on the first two since they have been addressed by other content creators, but the third one is something that I do want to highlight quite in depth. The first concern was about Burnice's Anomaly build-up speed, and I was initially concerned about this because the stage bonus makes her apply anomalies much faster, but she also isn't running an Anomaly Mastery disc in her trial. She should still apply anomalies slower than her trial does, but not by as much as I thought it would if you do run her on an AM slot 6. But whether or not that's her best option is debatable. If that disc doesn't allow you to reach a higher total number of burns being triggered, then running an attack percent slot 6 and getting more damage off of all of your burns would likely be better. If you're running her in a Piper team and trying to alternate between Assault and Burn to trigger as many disorders as possible, you might find that Burnice struggles to keep up, especially if you're just relying on her afterburn damage. Passing up on some potential disorders isn't necessarily a damage loss though, and when it is, it's probably not a huge deal anyways. The other concern was about her energy requirements, but this concern has mostly been alleviated for me after watching nakfrg's video where they test out Burnice's SIG versus other W engine options. It's in the description, and there's also a card to it on screen now. From the looks of it, Burnice shouldn't struggle to keep her heat gauge up even without a 2-piece swing jazz set or without her signature W engine, and if this is something that you're personally concerned about, going for a 2-piece swing jazz set and losing some damage for more comfort shouldn't be a bad trade. Going for an energy regen slot 6 seems overkill though. My last concern is something that I haven't seen anyone else bring up, so I want to spend some more time explaining it. If you're familiar with Anomaly teams, you'd probably know that Anomaly triggers have a 3-second internal cooldown, or ICD. What this means is that once you trigger a particular attribute anomaly on an enemy, there's a 3-second window before you can trigger that same anomaly again on that enemy. This is something that you can see extremely easily if you take Piper and do her spin on smaller enemies where you build anomaly quickly. After triggering the first assault, there's a period where you end up capping out your anomaly buildup, but the next assault can't trigger because it's still on cooldown. In these situations, any of that extra anomaly that you're applying doesn't end up overcapping, it's just completely wasted. Now this cooldown only applies to triggering that specific type of attribute anomaly, so triggering Assault and then triggering Burn wouldn't cause any issues as you can see here. But what's happening in this clip? Well, as it turns out, Disorder also has a 3-second cooldown, where once you trigger Disorder on an enemy, you can't trigger any attribute anomaly that would cause another Disorder during that 3-second window. If you were aiming to trigger multiple Disorders back to back, this cooldown gets in the way of doing so and leads to a period of time where you just have to wait. And just like with the Anomaly ICD, any additional anomaly that's applied during this period won't overcap, and instead it just gets wasted. This isn't something that's specific to Burnice, but this is more prevalent now since Burnice can actually do meaningful anomaly application, and she can also trigger anomalies from off-field. I'm sure that I ran into this issue more when playing her in the trial just because of the stage buff, but this is still something that you can and probably will run into, especially if you're playing a Piper team, since Piper applies so much anomaly with her spin. This is something that you are going to want to keep your eye on. Now, does this Disorder cooldown break any of Burnice's teams? No, not at all. At most, you're waiting an extra second or two to trigger an anomaly, and that's a minor inconvenience. However, it's definitely something that might affect how you plan your rotations, and if you ever see that your anomaly bar is capped and your anomalies aren't triggering, this is probably the reason why. There is also a chance that this could turn into a larger issue in the future if we do get a Disorder-based anomaly character who applies anomaly quickly, so being aware about that now is beneficial. And to finish off at the end here, let's talk a little bit about Burnice's value as a character right now and for the future. Burnice's kit is very beneficial for Disorder teams, but we're currently lacking a character that specifically benefits from Disorder as a mechanic. In my opinion, disorder teams with Burnice already feel pretty good, and while you could make the argument that they are viable without her, I don't think anyone would argue that they aren't more comfortable with her. Piper feels like a great teammate for her, and Jane should be even better due to her higher personal damage. And although I haven't played Grace at all, so I can't comment on her much, Burnice is her best Anomaly partner if you want to run her in a disorder team. But even with these teammates that do work well with her, none of these characters specifically benefit from triggering disorders. If we end up seeing a character in the future that either buffs disorder damage specifically, or gains other benefits from triggering disorder, so something like the stage buff, where they recover energy when triggering disorder, then Burnice's value would end up being even higher than it currently is. I'm not one to recommend pulling a character because they might synergize well with a potential future character. There's always the chance that the future character just never comes, or that you don't like them when they do come, so I'd always prioritize pulling for characters that you can benefit from right now. And as it stands right now, I do think Burnice is a very solid teammate for many Anomaly characters in the game right now, and by far the best Anomaly character for disorder teams due to her off-field presence. I know that there's probably concerns that we end up getting another off-field Anomaly character that just power creeps Burnice, and that's valid, but even if another character does end up filling that role, it wouldn't mean that you can't still play Burnice in these teams instead. I think that the more pressing concern is that if they end up releasing an on-field fire Anomaly character that heavily benefits from disorder, since then Burnice wouldn't be able to find a home in those teams. We don't have any indication of either of these things coming to pass though, so I wouldn't think too much about them for the time being. And that's where we'll end for today. I love Burnice as a character, so getting to talk about her more is always fun for me. Hopefully you found some of this stuff interesting or helpful, and if you did, leave a like. It lets me know that people enjoy this kind of content, and it also just helps the channel out. If there's anything that I missed that you want to know my thoughts on, leave a comment below. I read everything, and I respond to most things, and if there's anything in particular that does stand out, then I can make sure that I cover it in a video after Burnice's release as well, when I can actually get my hands on her and test more things out. Thanks for watching.